So I'm going to be talking about sports washing. Sports washing, in a sense, is soft power and propaganda that is used by countries and governments and powerful people to deter the public view or change the perception of the country and hide things that they've done. So I'm going to be talking about international soccer specifically. Obviously, so many countries play the sport. So many tournaments go on, and there's so many governing bodies over the sport itself, whether that's from the government or an independent ruling like FIFA. So my first point is going to talk about club football. So in the 90s, TV deals started and there was an influx of money in club football, especially in the Barclays Premier League, seen on the screen, but also Bundesliga and the Champions League. So immediately people started, taking notice. And Roman Abramovich was the first. He's a Russian oligarch who in 2003 bought Chelsea, who were a pretty big club, but weren't that successful. And since then, they've won two Champions League. He's poured millions and millions of dollars into them, but he recently got pushed out. And then in 2009, we have the Qatari Sports Investment Fund. They then bought Manchester City, poured a bunch of money into the team, new facilities, and they recently have been probably the best team in England. And then now, more recently, we have Newcastle United. This deal actually happened last year. Newcastle are a very rich and historic club, but obviously, with the issues going on in Saudi Arabia, there was some pushback to them actually getting the deal done, and it had to go through many courts. So, club football, in a sense, represents the opportunity of sports washing. It's the moment that somebody sees this is something that I can do. It's going to give me more money. People are going to be talking about me, but it might be in a better sense due to the fact that if you get the fans behind you. So next, I'm going to be talking about the World Cup. The World Cup is probably the easiest thing to pinpoint sports washing, especially the last three, because the entire world's view is on the World Cup. It is the biggest sporting event in the world that will ever be. I mean, it trumps the Super Bowl. So the first I'm going to talk about is the 2014 FIFA World Cup in Brazil. Now, Brazil are arguably probably the best nation in when you're talking about football in the world. They've won the most World Cups. So getting the World Cup to them in 2014 was very big, and the world was very much looking forward to it. So President Balancero, there was a lot of corruption that was involved in getting the World Cup to them, but also there was corruption within the government as well, talking about getting the funds to build the stadiums, what would even happen in the stadiums afterwards, getting people to actually build the stadiums themselves. So there were protests that arose in, I would say, probably the most poor areas of Rio de Janeiro and the Sao Paulo, and they were basically saying, like, as you can see on the screen, we need money for hospitals and educations. We don't need the World Cup. Funny enough, the point of getting the World Cup to them was for the entire world to have the spotlight on them, and they actually got humiliated on the world's biggest stage in the semifinal against Germany, losing 7-1. So yeah, that was just, kind of the first example. And now we go into Russia in 2018. Now this is, in my sense, I think this represents the power that it holds. So Russia, obviously, they aren't like the best country ever at the sport of football. They haven't won a World Cup ever. So when Vladimir Putin came up with the idea, wanting to get the World Cup to Russia, in a sense, I think for him it was just a flex. Like, look at me, I'm the world's most powerful man. Now I'm going to get the World Cup to my country and basically show what my country has to offer. Now, more recently, post 2018, they have invaded Ukraine, and that's, put a bunch of sanctions on them. And obviously, the worldview is back on them in a very negative light. But they've been, doing these type of things for decades now. So in 2018, it was kind of, very frowned upon. And now, more recently, last year's World Cup in Qatar, I would say, is probably the most prime example of what sports washing is at its heart. And it's basically to change the public perception. It's a new social view on a country. So getting the tournament to Qatar took, millions and millions of dollars in corruption and bribes from people like Jack Warner and Chuck Blazer of FIFA, and then Sepp Blatter. This basically kind of ended FIFA, which I'll talk about later. But yeah, it was supposed to be probably in the United States. They gave it to Qatar, and then now we have, I would say, probably the biggest scandal, which is workers' death. Now it's reported upon 3,000 to 4,000. A lot of reports vary, but it's around 3,500 workers died building the stadiums in Qatar. Poor working conditions, visas canceled. And this kind of in turn led to FIFA finally getting exposed to the corruption that was at its heart. But at the end of the day, they were being paid by people who, had countries that weren't looked upon in the best light, and they wanted the world's perception to change. And FIFA being so corrupt, and FIFA not taking a stand, hopefully in the future, this will show the dangers of what sports washing is. And now that FIFA has changed